Good morning and welcome back. Now, let me just say at the opening here that if ever there's a need of learning, extra learning, especially Chassidus, now is the time, because we know that together with the physical war going on in Israel, the tragic war, there's also a spiritual war always going side by side. The spiritual war is that each of us are also part of the military, and our learning and our mitzvahs and our charity and our good deeds and our achdus, unity, and Ahavas Yisrael, all is part of the battle. There's no question that the reason we're here today is the people, Jewish people, because just as when the Jews went to fight with Amalek, Moshe Rabbeinu was holding his hands up and praying to God. And just as Yoav, the head of the army of King David, was warring and fighting his battles, David was learning and studying and praying. So there's two sides to every milchama, to every battle. In that context, we're dedicating our learning, firstly, to the memory of all the terrible atrocities and losses of so many beautiful, innocent men, women, and children. And secondly, this same priority to all the soldiers and all the people on the front lines who are risking their lives to sacrifice themselves to protect their brothers and sisters, all the people in Israel. Hashem should bless that from here on it should only be victory after victory, to do what has to be done to protect ourselves. It's all on the defense. No, there's no question here about the moral clarity, what is right and what is wrong. When you see some of the images, or you hear about some of the images of how they defile and laugh at the naked children being either killed or murdered. I don't want to go into more graphic detail, and we know where we stand. So there's no question here. This is not a matter. It's just like in Nazi Europe, it was very clear what was good and what was evil. So Hashem should bless them all, be protected, to do what has to be done with no casualties at all. And from here on, we should go march straight to the Geula Amitis Vashlema and the eradication of Ruach Atuma Avim in the Eretz, of all negativity and evil, and obviously the hatred of Jews and so on. And again, our role is to do what we have to do on this front line. I'll just share a story that happened with my father-in-law when the war broke out in 1948, Independence War in Israel. So he was here in New York. He was a student, 1948. And he came from Israel. He had come from Russia originally, but he was living in Israel. Like he would call himself a Palestinian because he was there from before 1948. And his blood of your brothers is not cheaper than yours, and you should come back to join the battle here, the war. But of course, as the Rebbe, so he wrote to the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, what he should do. And the Rebbe wrote to him, the previous Rebbe wrote back to him this answer. He said that in a time of war, what is considered a deserter, arik in Hebrew, a deserter is not someone who's not fighting. It's someone who leaves his post. If someone who's running the communications or someone who's running another department decides to go do something else, that's equally deserting his role. Your role is to sit here and study Torah with full intensity and passion, and that's how you will be participating in helping that battle be fought. Now, this doesn't take away, obviously, this is not a statement that's saying that those that are reservists or others have to join the actual, but everyone has their role to play in the military itself. Not everyone's doing the same level of the same idea, the same job. Everyone has their role to play. So obviously, if any of you want to go to Eretz Yisrael to help, you feel you could be, by all means. But right now we're here. So the shocking news that came at the end of Yom Tov, who would believe such a thing now in Tavshin Pei Daled? But someone pointed out to me that the verse Tavshin Pei Daled, the 784th verse in the Torah talks exactly about eliminating all our enemies. Check it out. I think it's Deuteronomy, Dvorim 32, 30. I'm not sure which verse it is. The exact chapter and verse. Maybe Yitzchak can post it. So again, it should only be total Sati Shalom Ba'aretz, totally peace in Eretz Yisrael by eradicating every element of enemy. And Hashem should protect Hashem Yishmer Tzeschu Ve'echa. Hine le'yonam v'le'yishin Hashem Yisrael. God protects especially Israel as a promised land. Eretz asher eni Hashem elkecha ba b'reishis hashana b'ad achri shana. Where God's providence, God's eyes are there specifically. And the Rebbe's words, he always called it the safest place on earth. At the end of the day, everywhere in life is risky. And even though we've had this terrible, terrible setback and all these tragedies, but we forge ahead, and Am Yisrael Chai, we will prevail. So some opening words, and then we're ready to learn. If anybody wants to comment or say anything, obviously, please do so. And I am honored to be back with you and show our unity and our strength, and especially through learning.
Amen.
There is a big big dilemma now in Israel. Should they destroy the hospital in Gaza or not? Under the hospital building, there is a bunker with all the heads of the terrorists, animals. And this is something that we have debating for many years, never touched the hospital. I would like to hear your opinion about it.
Well, look, if Hitler and his top Nazis hid under a hospital, I wouldn't hesitate to say in 1 second, destroy them all. They're the ones that are putting the people in the hospital in danger. It's obviously a very shrewd and a very manipulative and actually cruel and sadistic thing, but I'm not surprised. I mean, the way they treat men, women, and children, like you said, animals. So they're doing exactly the same thing. I mean, if Israel has a way to get the hospital evacuated, by all means. But I wouldn't hesitate in one moment to destroy, if they know that fact. At this point, of what's happened here, complete self-defense. You know what? Civilians die during wars by accident or by collateral damage. And here you're going after that. It's my opinion, at least, my understanding of it.
Thank you.
Yuval, you're in Eretz Yisrael, right?
Yes.
So why don't you tell us from the front lines?
I'm not in the front line. I'm in the north right now. Of course, it can start from the north any second. The Hezbollah can start bombing, shelling. I have 3 children in the south which are being bombed every now and then. And I know what you know, because it's all in the media, I don't have anything extra to tell.
What is the mood? What is the feeling among the community where you're in? I mean, I could assume
shocked.
just
shocked. People were shocked. People are still shocked, and we want to. The mood is that Gaza has to be destroyed completely. Of course, they mentioned the town of Dresden in Second World War, which was completely destroyed by the Allies. Completely destroyed. I mean, if you see pictures from then, and that's what people mention now. That's what we have to do to Gaza and take control of Gaza and start building Jewish settlements in Gaza again. In my opinion, the fact that they took out the settlements in 18 years ago in 2015,
Yeah, yeah.
2005, 2005, 2015. Anyway, then they took the settlements is one of the reasons for this war, because with the settlements over there, we knew what's going on around us. And now we're completely blinded and blind.
Yeah.
You will.
Okay, so again, our prayers and hearts and soul goes out to all of you, to everyone. Anybody else wants to say anything, or then we can learn?
I want to ask my good friend Yuval. I mean, people over here, and I want to know, how could it have been such a failure of the vaunted Israeli intelligence to be totally caught with their pants down, if I could use that expression, and I heard it took 6 hours for the IDF to get there. What's going on? With all the surveillance equipment, everything's going on. How could they have been caught so unaware, Yuval? Isn't this a topic of the top discussion? How this Israeli intelligence fails so badly?
Eliezer, unfortunately, that was my first question a few days ago, and we'll hear the answers in 2, 3, 4 years, not before. Of course, people over here talking about traitors and stuff like this, but I don't want to get into it because there'll be investigation. There'll be an investigation committee, and they will hopefully will give us answers. Maybe not in a few years. That's the number one question.
If I may add, that question forces us to give one answer. It's a gzero min hashamayim. The same way we have miracles of things happening in a positive way, this is like a miracle in a negative way. And the only way to explain it was a gzera. There's no other way to explain it b'derech hateva. We don't have to accept the gzera. We have to tear heavens and ask the gzera should not continue, it should stop. But it's above seichel. It's above seichel.
Yeah, but even with that, there's always b'derech hateva what exactly happened, you know?
When there's a nest happening, we don't try to understand b'derech hateva how Kiras Yam will happen. You know it's a nest. So there's no derech hateva here.
Just Yuval, just for that one act straight, did it really take 6 hours for the IDF to come down to Sderot in those areas? 6 hours? Is that not correct? Is that false information?
And what if it took half an hour? The Air Force base is about 5 minutes, 6 minutes flight from that point. And if they put into the air 3, 4 helicopters, they would eliminate most of it. What came first after a few minutes is a single helicopter with no communication. Pilot had to use his cell phone to communicate, and he did his best. But
it's no question of colossal failure. There's no question
it's a colossal failure. Why?
Yeah,
I
agree with Yuval, but I want to just add, Eliezer, remember, the priority right now is a war. I'm sure that everyone's asking this question. You can't avoid this question. But right now, there's a war in hand, and they have to fight the war. That is the single most important thing, because they have to, first of all, eliminate any future issues and eradicate everything that happened here. But there's no question. This is the first question everybody's asking. So,
after the war, there will be many people that they will have to give answers. But like you said, right now, we have to concentrate on the war.
Right.
That's absolutely right.
If I may ask one more question. Everybody's saying, oh, we're going to we're going to have a carpet bomb, and then we'll take over Gaza. I always want to know what it's important in chess to have a great opening, but you also have to have what they call a great end game. What would be the end game, Yuval, even if we take over Gaza again? And
Eliezer, I think you should, for these answers, you're going to have to go to the Knesset and sit in on their meetings, because it's hard for me to believe they're not asking that question themselves. And they make the decisions. I mean, I wish we were the ones making, I don't know if we should be making the decisions, but you're speaking like as if we're the ones that are going to make this decision.
Why won't you say what the Rebbe said in 1974 with the war, and Israel was on the borders of Damascus, and the Rebbe said they should push and get into Damascus, and they gave the Rebbe all kind of excuses. And the Rebbe, just the fact to get in, even if you go out later, that by itself is a statement. So apply what the Rebbe said 50 years ago to today, and you have pretty much answers to what everything is happening and how things should be done.
That's interesting, Naftali. You're saying maybe just go in, take it over, and then pull out. Don't stay there forever. Maybe.
I'm saying what the Rebbe said. It's not my ideas. The Rebbe said it.
I understand.
The Rebbe said by Bringen. It's recorded.
Eliezer, the fact that you're saying get in and pull out, get in is all right. Pull out is not good. To say now pull out, don't get in, you won't have to pull out. You get in and you do what you have to do. What do you have to do?
Right now, the way that they are talking now, everyone, even the leftists, that the army has to go in, destroy them until the end, stay there, and there's no more any authority that could threaten Israel. This is the direction now. I hope that they will do it, but right now, everyone is for this solution.
Okay. All right. You mean permanent occupation, just have no other authority there. Well, the Israeli will be the authority. Okay, thanks. Okay, hopefully with God's blessings.
Again, this is what the Rebbe said very clear. Do not give back land. What does it mean, do not give back land? The Eibshter gave us by miracle land. Stay there and stay there and stay there. The Rebbe never said build another Palestinian authority that they should run the place. So yes, we have to go back to where we came from and stay there until the Arabs are going to realize the only way to live with us is in a peaceful way, the same way the Arabs for 50 years understood. Those who live in Ramle, in Yafo, in Lud, they kept quiet as long as they realized that this is the only way to stay alive. The minute they started thinking maybe we have another way, they started going wild. In Jaffa, in Tel Aviv, the first Israeli Hebrew city. So you got your answers though. Remember that every Palestinian is your enemy. As long as you remember it, you could live with him, he could be your neighbor, but remember he is your enemy.
Yeah, that's become very clear. I would also add that if this happened in any other country, tell me, what would Putin do? What would the United States do if Mexico, people from Mexico somewhere came into Texas and massacred 1,000 people? God forbid, or from Canada. Come on. Israel is held to a double standard. We know that. The anti-Semitism outside of that region continues to rage. And it's tragic. That's why the Rebbe always said Israel has to do what it has to do and not consider public opinion. Because public opinion weakens when you start thinking what others think and what others say. And unfortunately, we had to have this wake-up call. I mean, I don't want to point fingers, but if you go back to the 6-Day War, as soon as the Muslims or Arabs were offered the keys back to the Har HaBayis after a victory, you tell me, what happens if you would offer back the keys to the Nazis after World War II, after destroying all their cities? You can't never let the loser feel like they're a winner. And unfortunately, that's what happened. And it emboldened. I was in Israel in 1971. I was a young boy, 14 years old. I went everywhere. I took Arab cabs and Arab buses and I went to Hebron, I went to all the areas that you're not allowed to go to today. And there was nothing. They were completely at peeps. It was unbelievable. So the Damascus Gate, Shar Shechem, and so on. What happened? No, they didn't change. They still hated Jews then too, but they were losers and they understood it. As soon as you make a loser feel, a guy, a political strategist once told me, he said this, I know he said it's horrendous to say, but in history, if you have an enemy behind your lines, in other words, in your territory, you either have to kill them or you have to expel them. Because look what happened. America killed all the Indians, or almost all of them. In other countries, they completely threw them out. Jews never behave that way. But, you have the consequences when you don't do that. And I'm not suggesting killing anyone, only in self-defense. But you have to keep in mind a lot of ideological mistakes were made. And unfortunately, again, I'm not looking to point fingers. Now it's a matter of unity. We have a job to do to defend ourselves and protect our children, our men, women, and children everywhere, especially in Israel. So, but if you start analyzing, there's a lot to say on this whole topic.
What about the point, Rabbi Jacobson, that Gaza is not officially part of Eretz HaKodesh? So Shleimus.
1 second. Eilat is also not officially part of Eretz HaKodesh. This is not about Eretz HaKodesh. This is what the Rebbe would always say. Don't use religious arguments here. This is about defense. This is about the Siman Shin Chavtes and Hilchos Shabbos. Whether you're in France or in England or in the United States and you have enemies surrounding you, you have to always assume that the person is guilty until proven innocent. Meaning if they come to you, they say, let's just do business. Not they're attacking you. See, even on Shabbos, you're supposed to mobilize all your armies because this is a sworn enemy. Doesn't matter whether they attacked you 20 years ago, 50 years ago, they're a sworn enemy. You have to remember, Israel's in a state of war since 1948. There was never peace. These factions say clearly they're calling for the annihilation of Israel, complete Israel, not just Gaza. So the fact of the matter is, frankly, that's why the Rebbe was so opposed giving back Sinai. Is Sinai part of Eretz HaKodesh? It's not relevant here. Whatever you need, the buffer you need to protect yourself, and the Rebbe always say, go to military experts, not politicians, and not even rabbis for that matter. The issue here is like go to a doctor who tells you what's dangerous, what's not dangerous. Gaza is exactly on the border. Look at the danger that it posed right here. You don't need any more proof. It's exactly what happened. Whether it's part of Eretz HaKodesh or not makes no difference here in this context. That's how it works.
Good point about Shin Chavtes. Okay, I got you.
I think we should learn, and we could always have more conversations on this. Let's learn. I hope everybody's all right with that. That's and let the learning, as I said, go to the merit and honor of all the people that need protection, that need strength and courage. Go through whatever we're doing here, the collective. Unfortunately, Shiva, that we're all sitting for close to 1,000 innocent people. Yeah.
Amen.
I know many of you are on mute, but I'm sure you said Amen. Okay, good.
Amen.
So, my friends, where are we here? I try to see if there's a connection of this to what's going on in Israel. I'm sure you can find some. Actually, the Parshas we read has a lot of connections. We're reading the first Rashi of Chumash, tells us that they'll say that the Jews stole the land, and Hashem gave us the answer, Bereshis bara Elokim. So maybe that's a connection to Ayin Beis, because Ayin Beis discusses here the dynamics of that Bereshis bara Elokim, that God created existence and wants to create a full interface between the divine and existence, and we're in the middle of discussing exactly that. So let me sum up what we've learned for myself and for you, for the benefit of everybody, to refresh what we're learning here. So the overall topic is Achdus, the Yachid. When we say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, and then Baruch Shem Kved Malchus Elolam Vod, this is Yichud Elah, Yichud Tata, which is the essential mitzvah as he phrased it back on page. Just to give a little context, back on page 1466, that this is the mitzvah of Yichud, of recognizing the divine within everything. But there are two levels. One is that existence exists, and you recognize the bitla yesh, that existence should be aligned toward godliness. And the higher level of Yichud, Yichud Ilah, is that there's utterly only Hashem, and everything else is only, and everything that comes from Hashem is completely batel b'mitzias. It's coming only from a reflection, and even compared to the reflection, it's all batel, as we learned at length in the last pages. But all of this is coming to explain how we persuade or how we educate and train the animal soul to be aligned with this. Because remember, v'ahavtas Hashem elekecha b'chol levavcha b'shnei yitzarecha, that both sides of the heart, the right side, the left side, the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara, the divine soul, should also educate the animal soul, even though initially it is focused on its self-interest and its own needs, yet through this contemplation of Shema and Baruch Shem, we come to v'ahavtas Hashem elekecha. So that's the broader context of transforming the Tzimtzum, transforming the concealment that the animal soul obviously thrives on, to not just accept, but to love God with that full intensity. How do you do that? That was the question, the presenting question he asked on page 1466. And this is actually the question asked by the Alter Rebbe in the Maimer Mika Hashem Elokeinu HaMagbi L'Sheves, which is in Torah Eir, Chanukah, and the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer at length, as we have discussed. Those are the sources and the critical to understand all of this. So the question, as he asked, is how? In the words of Ayin Beis, he says, how? An animal soul is completely driven by self-interest, survival of its own needs, survival of the fittest, if you wish. So how do you change that? So that's the whole discussion here. You change it by hard work. The hard work is firstly understanding and appreciating, and then ultimately emotionally feeling the connection and love to God because of what God represents. That all of existence is non-existent in the eyes of God, meaning it has no value of its own. The animal soul thrives on its illusion, or at least on the concealment, that it is a self-standing entity. So Nefesh Elikis's job is to educate the animal soul. And how you do that is by contemplating on Yesh Ma'ayin. Creation is not Yesh Mi Yesh. God and existence have nothing in common, as he explained. There's nothing commensurate about them. And everything, and there's therefore no Shinui, no Hispilus in Etzem. What's the real point here? It's not just that philosophical point that God doesn't change, and Yeshem Leshanisi. It's to explain that everything in existence is changeable, is temporary, is mortal and mercurial. And it's only the real reality, true reality is only the emes elikim of Havaya emes. That's true reality and the truth of all truths. The more we can appreciate that, the more we can integrate that awareness, the weaker the physical world has a hold on us. The weaker the animal soul is seduced by this material world. That's essentially what he's saying in simple English. So, but the process is the whole discussion of the difference between Yesh Me Yesh and Yesh Ma'ayin, with the example given of the firstly sunlight, and then the main example of the light of the soul that does not affect the soul itself, even though there's a dimension of the soul that is affected, the mispilus memikri aguf, that the experiences of the body cause pain and pleasure to the soul on lower levels. And he compared that, the same thing with Elikus, but ultimately Elikus, even the lower levels are not really impacted in that way. Not talking about Maisa Tachtenim now, our actions obviously have impact. That's another track that we discussed. We're focusing right now on the process of creation. So therefore, Atuhu Achale Nivra Elam, Atu Misha Nivra Elam. I'm reading from page 1471, that the same God that was before existence, after existence, without any change. The more we can relate to that, the more this, again, physical existence does not have that same hold and hypnotic hold of us in its tentacles, which is that's the Avodah. So then he goes back on page 1472 that with this we'll understand Yichud Elah, Yichud Tata, which generally is Shema and Baruch Shem, but in Shema itself, Hashem Elokeinu and Hashem Echad. I'm looking at page 1472 now, and introduce the Das Elyon and Das Tachten, which essentially is the two perspectives, seeing existence from the eyes of God from above, seeing existence from the eyes of godliness within existence. And the third, that's two perspectives. Then comes the third level, where by Atzmus, both are equal. That's where he says, Kel Deus Havaya. V'lei niskanu alilis. Kel Deus Havaya. The Eibishter, both Deus are equal, like we said, because both are God's powers, divine power to shine a oir that is only focused on expressing the Elokus, and a oir that's focused on creating existence. But from Atzmus' point of view, both are equal. And that's the higher level of understanding. Once we come to that unity, then you understand it's not just that the Nefesh Habamis is a result of the concealment. Ultimately, the goal here is to understand that we are all coming from that one source, and there, everything is in a state of Yichud Elah, in those words. Or basically, Yichud Elah, Yichud Tata are all part of the unity with Atzmus. Not going over all the details on that, I'm just giving a summation here. Okay, yeah, let's see here. Yeah, then he spoke about this in both contexts of Atzilus the Pratis and Atzilus the Klolos. Okay, also before the Tzimtzum. Well, actually, what I just summed up, the third level is actually on page 1474, where he says, Omnam, Kel Deis Havaya, Kel Beis Hadeis. And then came the last paragraph that we learned. So if from Atzmus' point of view, both levels of Ayin, the Ayin of the Yesh Amiti, which is the Oyer that only is there to divine expression, Metzias Nimtza of Elikus. The Ayin of the Yesh Anivra is the Elikus that is tailored, Mamala Kalaman, the root of Mamala Kalaman that enters into existence. If from Atzmus' point of view, they're one, Hadalo Yesh Kan Beis B'chinas Ayin Klal. I'm reading the bottom of page 1474. Hakolu B'chinas Ayin Achad. The Ayin of the Yesh Amiti. Everything is one Ayin. So what do we say? Ani Rishon v'ani Achrin. The second question he asked is also no Hisavas then. From Atzmus' point of view, everything is all equal. What's the Hisavas? And we do say, Aleksi Bereshis Bara Lekim. There you have. He actually brings the pasuk this week's parsha. Bereshis Bara Lekim. So Acha Inyan. So how does he explain it? Is because Atzmus itself, Atzmus chose these two. It's not just from our perspective. It's not the second ayin, once the first ayin, the first level of travels, so to speak, transmits further, then another level of ayin emerges. No, God initially wants these two levels of ayin. So the same Atzmus that where it's both united wants these two. And Beis Madregas Hamshachim Einsei Baruchu, Beis Bini Hamshachas, one is to be completely higher than the Yesh, and the other ayin is to be the ayin of the Yesh. Both are still ayin. The Yesh is not commensurate to it. But one level of divine energy associates itself and engages with existence. I'm reading some select lines on top of page 1475 before we continue. We'll see if we have time to continue. Yeah. So he says, top of page 1475, so the Tzimtzum's role is to expose and reveal these two dimensions. Because if you don't have the Tzimtzum, they remain two forces within Atzmus as one. The Pulas Tzimtzum shenivdal b'chinas ha'ayin habeis ma'ayin ha'alef. But it's not the pshat that the second ayin comes from the first ayin. It's to separate the two because initially, from the outset, they are both equal forces of the divine, and as such, they're one in that sense. And that's what he says. That's why we have this yesh, ayin, and yesh, and the ayin breaks into two. You don't say there's one ayin, and from that ayin comes another, and you say yesh, ayin, yesh, and that ayin breaks into two. At Tzimtzum Passer divides, separates between them, and then he gave finally the example of a teacher and a student, Mashpia and Makabel. So the Mashpia on his own, the Sechel, Mashpia, The teacher is completely, the mashpia is completely apart from the student. But because he's going to ultimately teach the student, you have to say there's a oir, seichel, shayach, and makabel, but it's not obvious yet. It's not discernible. If you look at a master teacher sitting and learning on his own, you're not going to see two tracks. You'll see him completely immersed in what he's learning. And if you're able to go into his mind, you would see one big, powerful mind at work, studying or learning and understanding something. But you have to say within it lies hidden also the oir that will ultimately be transmitted to the makabel. It's not there yet. It's not yet obvious and definitely not been transmitted yet. So he's saying that's the example he's giving. When the mashpia conceived of the idea on his own, you have to say also there was the seichel that would ultimately be transmitted, but it's not shaloy, rak shaloy hayanikar. So then how does it become discernible? How does it become an entity that can ultimately be transmitted to makabel? By that tzimtzum ushenikar avnivda la'atzmei. So then the teacher needs to make a tzimtzum, where he conceals to some extent, or maybe all extent, the seichel and the full intensity as it is in his own. In other words, like I gave the example of dibur. He has to begin to prepare to speak, even if he's not speaking yet, but he's preparing. That's a tzimtzum. And that tzimtzum is going to reveal the oil that will be transmitted to the makabel. This in the nimshal, that's the kav. And the kav will already associate and be tailored to the recipient. So he says, like it is in the mashpia, the teacher. That's the first, the gili la'atzmei. There's no one else. It's only about how he reveals the idea to himself. And the second is the air that's necessary for the words. But the second level is not discernible, not distinguished yet, and separate at all. In the mashpia, like in the mashal, same thing in the nimshal, everything is one level. And when it's all one, in the mashpia, in this case in Atzmus, the level that is going to be the tzedek ha'elamis is the same level, same quality, and the same level as the earth atzmei, where he introduces now the words chitzenius, hayikamei ha'pnimius, ka'kol miyuchad mamish. Right. So the chitzenius. So then what happens next? That's where there's a separation between the outer chitzenius is referring to the oir that's let's say the ha'elamis, and the pnimius, and the form that comes now that's diminished, which means that it will be commensurate and be able to be fit into the oiris and kalim of the makabel. Actually, now I realize we learned further. I thought we stopped at that paragraph. No, I think we reached all the way up to the top of 1476, if I recall now. So let me sum up the next. Yeah. So let me sum up the next paragraph to where we're up to. And now, again, we'll see, but I'll try to go a little longer. Okay, so the next paragraph, the middle of page 1475 says like this. Let's see here. Yeah. Okay, so here, what we discussed and we learned this is that it makes a certain distinction, qualification, I should say, that this is in general the oil that shaykh the elements is the pnimius. That's completely higher than Gilead Elamis. And B'derech Klal, he calls that the root of the transcendent energy called Sevav Klalman. And Shorshe Be'erin Sav Shalifni at Tzimtzum. And the Chitzenius is the Chitzenius is the that relates to existence, and that's in general Mamala Kalal. The imminent energy that permeates and enters into existence. Omnam Kana Kavona. Yeah. we discussed this omnam. But here, he's saying, omnam kana kawana ba'er v'agili shebe'elamis, that the er and gili in the world itself, sheyesh b'zeh beis madregas. In other words, we're not just talking how it is above, but as the er comes and gili in the elements, there's two levels. Ha'echad, b'chinis ha'gili, b'chinis iskalus b'atzmus adayin. Ha'beis b'chinis isgalus shel chutz la'atzmus li'ez b'chinis mokel liyesh. Okay, you know what? I prefer, up to me, I would read this paragraph again, because to refresh, I remember there's a lot of details here. Thing is, time-wise, yeah, I wouldn't just sum this up. I would read it again, because I think it's critical to understand where we go from here, because it's been a while since we learned. So if you don't mind, I think I'm going to read this paragraph and learn it inside again with you. That fine? Yeah.
I think it's a good idea. It'll give us a better connection to the new material.
Yeah. I'm just looking at time-wise how we do this. I'm not going to finish it right now. It's too much to read here. Okay, let me begin and see as far as we can go. So he says like this. I remember I struggled what he meant by that last time we learned this. I'm trying to remember what I said, to be honest. Okay. 1 minute, please.
Wasn't it the idea of like the muscle of the sun, the ore that is shining versus the ore shekol b'atzmuso? It's still not Atzmus, but it's one with. Somehow that rings a bell. I wish I would have listened to the last class.
Yeah, I think I'm going to suggest, because I don't want to sit here and keep you waiting. I want to review this myself. Yeah, I think I'm going to read this myself, and we'll resume tomorrow, and we'll learn this inside. Just I think it's going to be more efficient to do that. But I'll stop here. So let's see this as a review. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
I have a question about the division of the I. You said ayin two parts. I guess there's the ayin to the yesh hanivra, and then there's the ayin to the yesh hamiti, the ayin that's in the middle. Is that what he means by dividing the ayin?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Exactly what he means.
I think that the main question still remains 100%. Is there a creation?
Yeah, I don't know if the Rebbe Rashab.
Hashem?
I know exactly what you're saying. I don't know if that question is directly answered. The first question is answered because they're both basically both Ratzon Hashem to Atzmus is obviously beyond everything, and he chose two tracks, but it's a process till those two tracks become distinguished. But the second question is there what's with his Savas, Bereshis Bara? I don't think the Rebbe Rashab actually answers that directly in this, because he didn't finish it. I do think, however, that when we learn the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, based on the Alter Rebbe's, we will find the answer. I mentioned there's a number of things that remain unfinished here, but the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer is, in my opinion, the solution, because there he discusses not every detail literally, but I think we'll be able to derive, and I think that's when we'll have the answer to that question. But that's a good point you're making, that he doesn't answer it, at least not yet. Remember, a big thing also needs to be addressed, which we will address, is why is all this so relevant to persuading the animal soul or educating the animal soul to also love God, which is where all this began. And in Torah, that's what he says briefly is through the Hizbonenus. But these details of the two levels, Yichud Yillah, Yichud Atah, is what the Mittler Rebbe and the Rebbe Rashab even more so elaborate. That seems to be critical in the impact on the animal soul. I mean, we speculated already that the reason for that is because it needs to be also addressed that the animal soul should understand it on its terms. So essentially, you can't just jump to Yichud Yillah, you need Yichud Atah. So in other words, even the divine within existence, ultimately you can explain to the animal soul as one with the divine beyond existence. That's what I believe is where he's going with this. But again, we'll learn this more when we finish Ayin Beis, and we'll continue with the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer. So I think that's why it's very critical to really understand every piece here, because there's no question that it's being unpacked. Again, the Torah, which we'll also learn, is much shorter. As a matter of fact, over Yontif, I was looking at the Torah again and again to see how just in maybe 10, 15 lines, we literally have 20, 30, maybe 40 pages from the Mittler Rebbe and the Rebbe Rashab in explaining that. Not 30 pages from the Rebbe Rashab, but 30 from the Mittler Rebbe. So we'll get to that. And I think all these questions will be ultimately answered then. Okay. Any other comments? Any other thoughts? I know when you learn this and then you see the events in Eretz Yisrael, it's quite a shocking contrast, because, it doesn't seem like anybody there from the enemy has any inkling about godliness within existence or godliness beyond existence. So for us, maybe it's an easy way to escape to an oasis, an island of our own. But the question is, how do you reconcile it? When you look at that hell and Behesta going on there, it's quite intense. I'm not saying that we have to go now educate the Hamas in Yichud Yillah, Yichud Atah. It would be enough to just get them to put down their arms and frankly kill everyone who's a criminal and who's such a hater and so on. But I'm just pointing out, because when learning this, I'm not forgetting the reality that's not just Yichud Atah that's lacking. We lack even the basic menschlichkeit, the basic humanity that's necessary to live. But at the same time, the truth that we're learning are absolute truths, and hopefully we draw down. I once wrote an article when I Tafrei Tzadik Daled were very tough times. It was 1934. It was just when the Nazis were coming to power, etc. And the Frierdiker Rebbe was then delivering he was then in Warsaw, I think. He was delivering very, very, very deep, some of the deepest concepts in Chassidus. So I always thought to myself that one of the reasons was, in a way, when there's real trouble on earth and real darkness coming, that what the Rebbes did, they went back into the engine room, to the very wiring of existence, because you have to tamper with those wiring to be able to at least survive in this darkness. And so even though it seems like, there's such crisis, but the Torah approach was always, we go deeper into connecting to God to help us get through such times. And hopefully that rewiring helps things down even in the lowest levels, and impacts even a war of this nature and this gravity going on in Israel. So just a thought, a parting thought on the what we're learning and what's happening.
I have a question. I don't know if you turn with the recording on or off. I'll let you decide. Can you tell me if you think this is a reasonable construction? In other words, this may be absolutely wrong, but I'm asking you. So regarding Yichudi Tata, Yichudi Ila, and so with let me phrase it properly. Shem Elokim and the idea of Shem Havaya being unified with Shem Elokim. That's the yichud of the two yichudim Tata, Yichudim Ila. And when I see this war, and I see the slaughter that our people suffered, which is it's really hard to put your mind around. Of course, even harder to put your mind around a Holocaust, but still, hundreds of, over 1,000 people cut down. We all know the details. Slaughtered, literally, like animals in a butcher shop. And I say, okay, well, that's the Shem Elokim is the God that sets the rules of this lowest world. It's the natural science, natural order. And so according to the laws of natural science, whatever, the enemy caught us with our pants down, and they did what they wanted to do. They had their way. And that's the way the Eberster set up the rules of science, if you will, the rules of natural science. But on the other hand, it's still the Eberster. Still Shem Havaya is above it and behind it. So when I see this seeming harshness and tragedy, I think to myself, above that God who allows those parameters and allows the enemy to take advantage of these parameters of natural science is Shem Havaya, is a God of pure love and nothing but kindness. And we have to see that somehow that's what's going on here, even though the very facial part of it is hard. It's hard to look at. It's hard, you can't take it. It makes you cry. But nevertheless, if you can try to have true bitachon, true emunah, we know in the end we'll be victorious, God's willing. And we know there's a reason for all this, even if we can't understand it. And we know that God's love is infinite and permeates everything, even when babies are getting kidnapped and slaughtered, that it doesn't make sense to us. But the Shem Elokim is still Shem Havai. There's a yichud, and we have to believe that there is love above this, even if we can't see it. We're below the clouds, if you will. Above the clouds, the sun is shining bright. What do you think about that construction?
Well, firstly, it's been said, and I would say in somewhat different wording by many great leaders that address this issue. What comes to mind is the Rebbe's father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, when he was being tortured and broken by his oppressors in Soviet Union. He wrote a whole reshima, he wrote up a whole manuscript about his life, his name, as well as all the places he sat in prison, essentially revealing the godliness even in the darkest of the dark. I always hesitate when I go into this territory because I don't want to try to rationalize or explain away atrocities and brutality, because it becomes to me a little more philosophical. You're sitting with a mother who, let's say, lost a child, God forbid. But definitely not going. I'm not suggesting that we're going to explain to her Havaya Elokim. That's not my point. My point is that there's a certain measure of just humility and humble silence. You can cry with someone even though you don't have answers. And that's why we sit Shiva. We don't sit and say, hey, it's really, I'm using your words, above the clouds, it's really beautiful. We say, yes, it's really dark. We don't understand God's mysterious ways. That's why Vayidam Aaron was silent. When the martyrs were being killed, the 10 martyrs, Hashem says, shtoik, when it says, zu Torah v'zu schara, this Torah and this reward, Hashem didn't go and explain, let me explain to you how things are before the Tzimtzum and my deeper kavanah. He said, be silent. This is what arose in my thought. and many, many other such instances. So I generally tend to gravitate to that response initially. Then once the dust settles, so to speak, and we're out of the emotional agony and which was required to heal, and the catharsis and all the shock, then there's another discussion, which is what are the philosophical implications of all of this? And that's where Tzimtzum and Havaya and Elikim, Yichud Lo, Yichud Dato have a place. But I think it's important to do this in two different stages and also know the timing. Actually, I write this pretty much in my book, Toward a Meaningful Life, on the chapter on pain and suffering and good and evil. I think pain and suffering primarily, these two elements. So what you're saying is not philosophically wrong. I'm just saying you have to say it in context and also within the context that I just placed it in. But yes, obviously, we know that everything God does is for the good. But how do you see that when you see the slaughters as you describe it? It's not humanly possible to fathom something like that. There's no way you can ever wrap your head around that. That's why God's thoughts are not our thoughts. So what you're saying is correct, but I would contextualize it in the way I just did. I mean, I'm being brief.
Understood. Thank you. It gives me comfort. I mean, honestly, when I lose it emotionally over the slaughter, I cry when one Jewish soldier dies or Jewish person dies. When over 1,000, I mean, what do you do with that emotionally? It picks me up to think about Shem Havaya, is all I can say.
No, and listen, on an individual level, anything that works, I'm definitely not going to, that's for sure. I was saying it more, like would I go out now and speak about that in a public video? Probably not, because for the reasons I said, right now is everything has it. Now it's like Ace Lifkais. There's a time to cry. There's a time to rejoice. There's a time. But individually, by all means, I'm not happy to hear, but anything that can bring consolation. And as I said, Rav Levi Yitzchak, the way he, even though he was like literally broken, I heard from one of the Chassidim that helped him in the end of his life. He said to him in Yiddish, he said, Kibar Kuk was the shame am abgetan with me. He couldn't even move. He couldn't eat. He needed physical assistance. And he said, look at what the Rishayim did to me. Now, what did they do to me? So at the same time, he clearly found strength when he connected it to the deeper spiritual Kabbalistic levels as he does. It's a very fascinating Rishimah to see him writing about his own suffering and putting it all in the context of Hey Gvuras, and he was a Kabbalist, so it's all with the context of the Spheres and Atzilus and higher and this and Helam and Gvuras. Levi is Gvuras, Yitzchak is Gvuras, his name, and all the places he sat, he finds a lakus everywhere, meaning the higher level, even though it's all within tremendous suffering.
What's the citation there? Can I find it? What is the Pinterest?
It was, it's printed in his Rishimas. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, Likutei Levi Yitzchak is the name of the series, but Likutei Levi Yitzchak on Tanya, so they printed it at the beginning there, and it's in a few other places. Just look up, they probably translated as well, but you can look it up, both Hebrew and English. Just look up Rishimas of Levi Yitzchak Schneerson on Ala Meiser. Meiser meaning his imprisonment, Mem Aleph Samach Reish. And you pretty much be able to find it. I'm sure it's pretty out there.
Thank you.
It's not long. It's like maybe 30, 40 lines.
Okay, thank you.
Yitzhak, could you post that if you find it?
Yeah, Blinetter. I will.
It's mind blowing actually, because he didn't write that when he was sitting on a beach or in some cafe. He was suffering terribly, and the fact that he was able to see it that way, And this is these are what the great people, that's how they are able to get through the most difficult times. And we can get strength from that by all means. It's still hard. You can't become intellectual here and avoid the emotional stuff. But again, not in any way, God forbid, invalidating or dismissing what you said, especially if it helps.
It has helped. Our learning here has helped me all through the Chagim. This learning we've done is catapulted my holiday experience this year. So I want to thank you publicly.
my honor. I'm a channel. Hopefully we'll get. So again, let's conclude here because I do have to go a few things. I must with a bracha for our brethren, those that families that have been broken, and above all to protect our Sahal, who are the most sacred people, literally giving young people, giving their lives, sacrificing their lives for protecting all of us. And all our tefillas, prayers, and our learning and everything we do should serve them well, stand as a merit to them. And God should, the key is, as it was mentioned here, God should protect and God should fight the wars. So we shouldn't have to have any pain or any suffering or any death or casualties. Okay, well, there's a lot to say, a lot more to come. I just for the record, I just did yesterday, I recorded 23 videos, short little videos that are going to be put out. You know, people have asked me questions. How do you explain this to children? What can we do? The why? So I did a lot of 1 minute, 60-second videos. So
the so-called shorts.
Yeah, they call it shorts, right? Exactly. So our video editor asked me, "Can I just record?" So I was in California actually. So I went outside. I sat down and I knocked them off. Knocked them off. That's not maybe the right way to put it. Sorry about that expression. It streamed from me. Let's put it that way. Yeah, they'll all be posted. Obviously, that's not sure what the strategies. I think they're already being posted. Some of them. Okay. So let me firstly finish the recording. So we did a review of page 1475 and before. Is it 1475? Yeah.
76.
Yeah, that's what we're up to, but I didn't really read 76.
Yeah.
Okay.